They didn't warn me about the silence. Not the kind you get in small towns or quiet forests. No, this was heavier, like the world itself was holding its breath. The kind of silence that made your ears ring just to remind you you're still alive. That was the first thing I noticed when I pulled into the cracked parking lot of Moonlight Pines Lodge. It was nearly 10:47 p.m., and the road behind me had vanished into the dark like it never existed. No signs of life. No distant headlights. Just me, my old Corolla coughing smoke, and a motel that looked like it had given up years ago. The neon sign buzzed weakly above the front office, Moonlight Pines. Half the letters were out, so it just read, M-Light P.S. I killed the engine and sat there a moment, trying to convince myself this was just another dead-end job, not some mistake I'd regret. But I was broke, and this was the only place that had called back. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and old paper. The front office was a time capsule from the 80s, faded wallpaper, dusty ficus plant in the corner, and a brass bell on the desk that looked like no one had rung it in years. A small laminated sign sat on the counter. The letters were bold and clear. Rules for the night shift, read carefully. I blinked at it. Rule number 1, do not check in guests past 11:47 p.m. Rule number 2, if someone knocks on room 6, do not respond. Rule number 3, if the TV in room 9 turns on by itself, turn it off immediately. Rule number 4, if someone says they're James, they're lying. At first, I thought it was a joke. Some twisted company prank to spook the new guy. I gave a half-hearted chuckle, tossed my backpack behind the desk, and started looking for the room keys. There was no manager on site tonight. A voice on the phone earlier that day, a man with a dry, flat tone, told me everything would be ready when I arrived. The keys were in a drawer labeled rooms. The ancient PC was already logged in. There was even a sticky note with the Wi-Fi password. Are you NWHILEYUCAN? Cute. I sat in the creaky office chair, half expecting someone to jump out and yell gotcha. But the minutes dragged on in silence. At 11:03 p.m., the desk phone rang. A sharp, piercing ring that shattered the quiet. I jumped, knocking over a pen. I stared at it, letting it ring twice more before I picked it up. Moonlight Pines. Night clerk speaking. Static. Then a whisper. Don't open the door. The line went dead. I held the receiver for a moment longer before slowly setting it down. I told myself it was prank callers. Maybe even the owner messing with me to test my nerves. But my hand was shaking. I looked back at the laminated card. My eyes landed on rule number 2 again. If someone knocks on room 6, do not respond. There was a floor plan taped behind the desk. I found room 6. It was one of the rooms on the far left wing of the motel, the side facing the woods. No cars were parked near it. No guests were scheduled to be there tonight. And yet, a strange feeling settled in my chest. Like something was already waiting. By the time midnight rolled around, I had locked the office door, turned off the front lights, and was sitting with my phone flashlight on, watching the camera feed loop on the monitor. Nothing moved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something out there knew I was here now, and that it had just begun watching back. The night air outside was thick and still, the kind of quiet that made you feel like something was holding its breath. I sat behind the chipped front desk of Moonlight Pines, spinning a rusted motel key between my fingers. Room 3. Vacant. Or so I thought. A cheap wall clock ticked above my head. I looked up, 11:56 p.m. Just 4 minutes until midnight. 4 minutes until it was officially the dead hour. I leaned back in the old office chair and reread the laminated card of motel rules for the 10th time. My eyes lingered on the first line. 1. No check-ins after 11:47 p.m. No exceptions. It was an odd rule. Specific. Like someone had tested every minute and knew exactly when things changed. But that was the thing about this job. Everything felt off. The flickering hallway lights, the carpet that smelled like mildew and copper, the old paintings with eyes that always seemed to follow you. Then I heard the bell. The little silver bell on the desk let out a sharp ding, and I jumped. My heart skipped a beat. Someone was standing on the other side of the glass door. A man. He wore a long gray coat soaked from the drizzle outside. His face was pale, almost bluish under the flickering porch light, and he had this hollow look in his eyes, like he hadn't slept in days. I glanced at the clock again. 11:57 p.m. Shit. I opened the door anyway. Something about him made it hard to say no. Not in a friendly way, more like I didn't want to see what would happen if I refused. You open? He asked, voice low and hoarse. I nodded, stepping aside. Just made it in time. I lied. My hand trembled as I reached for the key labeled room 3. He didn't say much, just handed over cash, old, wrinkled bills that smelled like smoke, and signed the guest book with a name I couldn't pronounce. Something with too many vowels. His handwriting was strange, crooked like the letters didn't want to sit still. I watched him walk down the hall, his footsteps barely making a sound on the thin carpet. When he disappeared into room 3, I let out a long breath and sat back down at the desk. The clock struck midnight. I stared at the rule card. No check-ins after 11:47 p.m. No exceptions. Too late for that now. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. I was starting to convince myself that everything was fine, that maybe the rules were just leftovers from some paranoid old owner, when the monitor buzzed. The motel's ancient security system flickered to life. Each room had a black and white feed. Room 3's camera showed nothing. Empty bed. Lights off. No signs of movement. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. He had gone in there. I saw him. He took the key. I clicked over to the hallway camera. Rewound. Watched as the man walked down the hallway, but never reached the door. He stopped outside room 3 and just vanished. I checked the front door camera. No one came back out. My hands went cold. I stood, grabbed the flashlight from the drawer, and made my way down the hallway. The air felt heavier with each step, like the walls were pressing inward. Room 3 was at the far end. I reached the door. Listened. Silence. I raised my hand and knocked once. Nothing. I knocked again. Still nothing. I slipped the spare key into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open. I pointed the flashlight inside. The bed was made. The bathroom door stood open. No luggage. No wet footprints. The room looked untouched, like no one had stepped inside in years. But the key was gone. The one I gave him. It wasn't on the hook anymore. I stepped back and shut the door. Locked it, and as I turned to leave, I heard something faint. Breathing. Right behind the door. Slow. Wet. Ragged. I didn't check again. I walked straight back to the office, my legs stiff, my skin crawling like something invisible was pressing against me. I sat behind the desk and didn't move for the rest of the night. When the sun finally rose, the camera for room 3 went dark. Black screen. Static. The key was back on the hook, and the name in the guest book. Gone. Like it had never been written. I looked down at the laminated rule card, my hands trembling. Rule number 1. No check-ins after 11:47 p.m. No exceptions. Now I knew why. The clock on the wall read 2:41 a.m. Outside, the night was a thick black sheet pressed against the motel windows. No wind. No cars. Just the distant hum of cicadas and the occasional crackle from the old neon sign that buzzed like it was chewing on electricity it didn't want. I sat behind the front desk, half asleep and fully bored. The cheap plastic chair creaked every time I shifted. My eyes stung from staring too long at the flickering monitor showing the grainy hallway cams. The place was dead quiet. Not a single guest had stirred. Room 3's door was shut. Room 7 looked untouched. I was reaching for my thermos when I heard it. Knock. Knock. Clear. Sharp. It came from down the west hallway. The sound echoed faintly through the front lobby, enough to snap me fully awake. I froze, hands still hovering above the desk. Another knock. This time softer, like knuckles brushing against the door instead of tapping. I leaned forward and glanced at the monitor again. Room 6. The door was shut. Still. No movement on screen. I muttered to myself, trying to shake it off. Probably the pipes. Or a tree branch. Or raccoons. Definitely raccoons. But I didn't believe that. Because I already knew the rules. Rule number 2. If you hear knocking at room 6, don't answer. I leaned back in my chair, heart tapping faster than I liked. The air around me suddenly felt thicker. Heavier. I could hear my own breath, sharp and uneven, like I'd run up a flight of stairs. Knock. Knock. This time it was closer. Too close. Like it was right behind the front desk. I stood up slowly, careful not to scrape the chair legs against the floor. My hands were sweating. I wiped them on my jeans and walked toward the hallway. Not too close. Just enough to peek. From here, I could see it clearly. Room 6. The door stood still under the weak ceiling light. The number was faded, like someone had tried to scratch it off. The paint peeled around the frame. It looked like no one had touched it in years. Then I heard the voice. Help me. A child's whisper. A boy. No older than 6 or 7. The sound was weak, like it was coming through layers of water. Please. It's cold. My blood ran cold. Every instinct screamed at me to run. To leave. To get in my car and drive until sunrise. But I stood there, staring at the door. That voice, it was familiar somehow. It tugged at something in the back of my memory. I stepped forward. Just one step. Then another. Don't be afraid, the voice said more clearly now. I was 5 feet from the door when I saw the doorknob turn. Slow. Creaking. No one on the cameras. No shadow under the door. Just that sound, the soft metal click of something trying to come through. That's when the rule screamed in my head. Don't answer. Not just the door. Don't answer the knock. Don't answer the voice. Don't even think about it too long. I backed away. Slowly. I didn't take my eyes off the door until I was back at the front desk. I reached under the counter and pulled out the flashlight the manager had left behind. It barely worked, the beam flickering like it had stage fright. I stayed awake until dawn. No more knocking. No more voices. Just the hum of the sign outside and my heartbeat thumping in my ears. But when I reviewed the hallway footage before my shift ended, room 6 was open at 2:44 a.m. Just for a second. Just wide enough for something to slip through. I rewound the tape 5 times. And on the last replay, I saw a small pale hand, gently closing the door from the inside. I remember the exact time because I'd been watching the clock for what felt like hours. 3:13 a.m. That number burned itself into my mind the second it happened. I was in the front office, hunched over the desk, flipping through a ratty motel registry book from the 90s. My eyes were dry, heavy. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows like a desperate thing trying to get in. The ice machine groaned randomly like it was in pain. The kind of night where your skin feels too tight and your ears strain for noises you're not sure are real. Then the TV in room 9 turned on. I didn't hear the sound at first. It was the light. A sudden flicker of static flashing against the trees, bleeding through the curtains. I stood up slow, heart thumping. The cameras mounted above the front desk were grainy, black and white, cheap, outdated. But one of them faced room 9. I looked at the monitor. Room 9 lit up like a signal flare. I grabbed the rule card. I'd been keeping it in my breast pocket, as stupid as that sounds. I unfolded it quickly. Rule number 4. The TV in room 9 turns on at 3:13 a.m. Turn it off immediately. No explanation. Just that. Like everything else on that damned list. I hesitated for a second. Thought maybe I'd call the room, but I hadn't checked anyone into room 9. It was supposed to be empty. I grabbed the master key and headed outside. The cold slapped me in the face as soon as I opened the door. The air smelled metallic, not like blood but close. The kind of scent you get before a lightning storm. I moved fast, gravel crunching under my boots, each step louder than it should have been. The other rooms were quiet, curtains drawn tight. No sign of life. When I reached room 9, the door was closed. But I could hear the TV clearly now, static hissing like a snake coiled just beneath the noise. A thin strip of light pulsed beneath the door. I knocked once. My voice sounded small when I said, housekeeping. I don't know why I said that. Habit, maybe. Nerves. No answer. I unlocked the door. The second I stepped in, the smell hit me. Mold, wet carpet, something sour beneath it. The TV was facing the window, white noise flickering across the screen like a blizzard. The room was empty. Bed untouched. No bags. No clothes. No guest. And then, on the screen, something changed. Just for a second. I saw myself. Not like a reflection. I saw a version of me, standing in this very room, staring into the screen. Only he wasn't moving like I was. He was still. Too still. His head tilted slowly to the side, and he smiled. I blinked. Gone. Back to static. My hands were shaking, but I managed to reach the TV and shut it off. The room went dead quiet. No wind. No humming. No ice machine. Just the thick, sticky silence of something holding its breath. Then the ticking started. Soft at first. Like a distant clock. I turned around, trying to find the source. It wasn't coming from the TV or the bathroom or the wall. It was coming from under the bed. Every part of me screamed to leave. But something made me kneel. I lifted the bedspread slowly and peeked underneath. There was nothing there. Just darkness. And yet the ticking grew louder. Tick. 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 Suddenly, the alarm clock by the bed, which I hadn't noticed before, lit up and reset itself. 3:13 a.m. Again. I bolted out of there. Slamming the door behind me, locking it, double-checking, heart racing so fast it felt like it might burst. I ran back to the office and shut the main door. Locked it too. When I looked at the monitor again, room 9 was pitch black. No light. No movement. But the audio feed? Still hissing. I sat down, pulled out my phone, and started recording my voice for the first time since I started this job. Night 4. Moonlight Pines. I don't care if no one listens to this. Something is wrong with room 9. And the rules, they're not a joke. They're warnings. And I paused, hearing something behind the walls. A whisper, just faint enough to wonder if it was my imagination. I think the motel remembers James. And it's trying to show me what happened to him. Click. End of recording. That was the first night I started sleeping with the lights on. That was the first night I started watching the clock, waiting for 3:13 to come again. There's a rule on the laminated card that always bothered me more than the rest. It's written in bold, like the ink was pressed harder, angrier. Rule 5. If someone says they're James, they're lying. I remember laughing at it my first night, back when I thought this place was just a weird backwoods motel with plumbing issues and a mold problem. But after the knocks from room 6, the static in room 9, and the way the hallway lights flicker in patterns that feel like Morse code, I stopped laughing. The rules weren't jokes. They were warnings. That night, it was raining again, Ohio rain, cold and slow like it had weight to it. The kind that clings to the windows and makes the world outside look like it's melting. I was behind the desk, sipping stale coffee and flipping through James's old guest logs I found in the back room. Most of them were scribbled nonsense. But every now and then, a name would repeat itself. Same handwriting. Same initials. Just enough to make your stomach twist. At exactly 12:13 a.m., the bell above the front door rang. That bell only rings when someone walks in. But I didn't hear footsteps. Just the soft hiss of the rain behind the open door. The lobby smelled different too, like iron and old leaves. Not rot, not mildew. Something stranger. I stood up and peered over the counter. There he was. A tall man, maybe late 40s, in a dark coat soaked from the rain. He had short hair, gray around the sides, and skin that looked too smooth, like wax left out in the sun. His eyes didn't blink often. They just stared. Deep and calm. Like still water right before something breaks the surface. He smiled. Evening, he said in a voice too calm for someone dripping wet. I need a room for the night. I nodded slowly, trying to act normal. Sure. You, got a name? He paused, like the question was unexpected. Then he said it. James. The word hit me like a hammer to the chest. Not because it was loud. It was soft, almost polite. But it was the one name I'd been told never to trust. I stared at him for a second too long. My mind screamed. Rule 5. He's lying. He has to be lying. Still, I kept my face straight and slid the guest log toward him. All right, James. Sign here. He didn't hesitate. Picked up the pen. Wrote in long, elegant strokes. And then, with that same unreadable smile, he asked, Quiet place you've got here. Too quiet, I said, trying to match his calm. Some folks say it's cursed. Cursed? He chuckled softly. No, not cursed. Watched. That word stuck to the walls like mold. I handed him the key to room 2, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what else to do. He took it, nodded, and turned toward the hallway without another word. As he walked away, I noticed something. His reflection in the glass door. It wasn't there. I watched the rain smear across the glass, but no figure moved with his. Just emptiness. And then he stopped. Right at the edge of the hallway. Without turning, without facing me, he said, You're learning, Eddie. I hadn't told him my name. The hallway swallowed him after that. Lights dimmed behind him one by one, like his presence sucked the life out of the bulbs. I didn't sleep that morning. I didn't even blink for hours. I just sat behind the desk, gripping that laminated rule card with both hands, reading Rule 5 over and over again. If someone says they're James, they're lying. So who know what just checked in? And why did it know my name? I think I'm getting close to the truth now. Closer than I should be. The silence was heavier than usual that night. No humming from the vending machine. No faint static from the old office radio. Just the sound of my own breathing and the buzz of a single flickering ceiling light, twitching like it had something to say. I had survived 5 nights at Moonlight Pines by obeying every strange rule on the laminated card. Even the ones that didn't make sense, especially the ones that didn't make sense. But the motel didn't care about logic. It only cared about obedience. And tonight, something wanted me to find something. It started with the smell. Not the usual mildew and cigarette ash that clung to the carpet, but something older. Damp wood, iron, and something like burned hair. It came from the supply closet behind the front desk. I'd passed by it 100 times, but tonight the doorknob was cold like metal pulled from a frozen lake. Inside, it was just shelves of towels, rusted plunger buckets, and ancient mop handles. I started to back out, but then something creaked beneath my foot. A hollow echo. I froze. The floorboard near the far shelf was loose. When I stepped on it again, it dipped with a dry groan like an old throat trying to speak. I dropped to my knees and tugged at the edges. Dust filled my nose. After a few tries, the board popped free with a crack, revealing a dark hole underneath. I hesitated. This job didn't pay enough for secret holes in the floor. But I also knew this place didn't give you choices. Just tests. So I reached in. My fingers brushed something cold and smooth. Leather. I pulled it out, a thick journal, bound in cracked black hide. A thin cord wrapped around it twice, knotted like it wanted to stay sealed. The name on the cover was smudged. But the initials on the spine were clear, J.H. James Harlan. I sat on the floor, opened it, and began to read by the dim hallway light. The first page was a mess of ink and scribbles. Notes about rules, symbols, and the Appalachian Skinwalker myth. He wrote about the land, the cursed patch of soil this motel was built on. He said the motel was not meant to house travelers. It was built to trap something in. The rules weren't protections. They were chains. Rituals to keep the Skinwalker weak. If followed, it couldn't fully enter our world. But every time a rule was broken, every time a guest ignored a sound, or Eddie let a man in after midnight, it gained a little more strength. James's entries got more frantic the deeper I read. He wrote about hearing voices in his sleep, about seeing versions of himself standing at the edge of the parking lot, not moving, not blinking. He said the Skinwalker could imitate your worst thoughts, your best memories, anything to get closer. There was a drawing tucked between 2 pages, charcoal on yellowed paper. It showed a figure standing in the hallway of the motel. No eyes, no mouth, just skin stretched too tight across a human shape. The words scrawled underneath read, "It wears us to feel real." My hand shook. In the next few pages, he wrote about room 6, how it was the heart of the motel, the first room the Skinwalker claimed. That's why the knocking starts there. That's why it whispers like a child. It's the room where it broke through. I turned to the last entry. It was dated 2 years ago. The ink was shaky, like it had been written during a storm. I broke rule number 4 last night. The TV stayed on. I saw it. I saw myself inside the screen, watching from the other side, smiling. I think it's too late for me. But if someone finds this journal, you still have time. Finish the ritual. Don't trust the mirrors. And if it calls itself James, run. My mouth was dry. I didn't even realize how tight I was gripping the journal until my knuckles turned white. As I stood up, the light in the hallway behind me blinked. Once. Then again. Then it went dark. From down the hall, I heard a voice. It was my voice, calling from room 6. "Hey, Eddie. You found it, didn't you?" The door to the supply closet creaked slowly shut behind me, and the motel smiled. I don't remember falling asleep. I never do. One moment I was staring at the front desk monitor, watching static ripple through the hallway cam like waves. The next, I blinked and the sun had started bleeding over the trees. Just a smear of pale orange on the edge of the woods. But the time on the clock. 3:13 a.m. Again. My mouth was dry, my shirt stuck to my back with sweat. I rubbed my eyes and reached for my audio recorder. It wasn't where I left it. I found it on the floor, under the desk, still running. When I pressed play, all I heard was my own voice whispering. "Don't look at it. Don't let it know you see it." I don't remember saying that. Something is wrong. The rules, they don't work anymore. Last night, I followed every single one. I shut the blinds by midnight. I left food outside room 6. I turned off the TV in room 9 without even looking at the screen. I even ignored the tall man who came in at 2:03 a.m. asking for his usual room. I sent him away. But it didn't matter, because the door to room 6 opened by itself at 2:12. I didn't see it. The cameras did. I played the footage back on loop. No one walked out. No one walked in. Just door open, door close. Then silence. Cold, heavy silence that sat on my chest like a rock. I tried calling the owner again. No answer. I left 3 voicemails, all whispering versions of the same question. What happens when the rules stop working? No reply. Around 4 a.m., the lights in the hallway began to flicker. Not just the hallway. Every room. Like something was moving from door to door, room to room, breathing down the walls and drawing energy as it passed. The bulbs didn't just flicker, they shuddered. They dimmed with a buzzing hum like a swarm of bees behind glass. And then the scratching began. At first, I thought it was the pipes. Old buildings groan. I've learned to ignore most of the sounds. But this was different. Too rhythmic. Too purposeful. I walked past room 7 and stopped cold. A voice whispered my name from the other side. Not screamed. Not shouted. Whispered. Low. Deliberate. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it knew me. Eddie. I backed away. My legs moved on their own like something in me already understood. Do not answer. My hand brushed against the laminated sheet in my pocket. The rules. I pulled it out and read them, even though I've memorized every word. 10 rules. No updates. But now they felt useless. Hollow. Like commandments from a god who stopped watching a long time ago. I sat at the front desk, staring at the hallway feed, and watched something crawl on the ceiling. A shape. Pale and thin, with too many joints. It moved like a spider in reverse, slow, graceful, and terribly wrong. I blinked. It was gone. I rewound the feed. It wasn't there, but I saw it. And that's when I realized something I hadn't thought of before. The rules don't protect us anymore. They only delay the thing that's coming. Something in this motel is evolving. Or maybe it's waking up. And every time a rule is broken or fails, it gets stronger. Hungrier. At 5:33 a.m., someone knocked on the front door. Not rang. Not knocked politely. Pounded. I didn't move. I just stared at the door, knowing no one should be out there. Not this far in the hills. Not at this hour. I crept toward the window beside the door and peeked through the blind. What I saw made my skin crawl. It was me, standing on the other side, wearing my uniform. Same tired eyes. Same scar on my lip. But the smile wasn't mine. It stretched too wide. Held too long. I tilted his head like a curious dog. Then he whispered something I could barely hear through the glass. Let me in. You're tired. I'll take the next shift. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stood there, heart pounding. After a few seconds, he stopped smiling. And then he walked away backwards. No turn. No footsteps. Just gliding into the fog like a puppet being reeled back into the dark. I went back to the front desk and tore the laminated rule sheet in half. It didn't stop whatever's out there. Nothing will. I think I have 2 choices now. Find the root of this, or die in the dark like James did. Tomorrow night, I'm going into room 6. God help me. The air in Moonlight Pines was thick, like someone had smothered it in a wet blanket, suffocating the breath out of the place. The clock on the wall ticked, louder now, every second echoing in my skull. Time seemed to crawl and race at once, and I felt it pressing on me, like I was caught between 2 worlds, neither quite real. I sat in the back office, the flickering fluorescent lights buzzing above me. The journal was open in front of me, James Harlan's journal, the one I found under the trapdoor in the closet. The pages were brittle, old, and the ink was smeared in places, like someone had spilled sweat or tears on them. But the words were clear enough, etched into my mind now like a brand. A ritual. A way out, or so it promised. But the more I read, the more I realized that James hadn't written this to save anyone. He had written it to become something. Something more than human, something tied to this motel, this cursed place, this force that clawed at the edges of my mind every damn night. I ran my fingers over the symbols scrawled on the page. They didn't make sense at first, just a jumble of shapes that seemed to twist and writhe under my touch. But when I looked at them long enough, when I let my tired eyes linger, they started to form patterns. A pattern I recognized. A warning. I had to make a choice. The journal offered me 2 options. I could banish the Skinwalker, whatever it was that haunted this place, or I could bind myself to it, become its new keeper just like James had. The problem was, I wasn't sure I had a choice at all anymore. The motel wasn't just a building. It was a living thing, feeding off of fear, of confusion, of people. People like the ones who checked in every night, unaware that they were walking straight into a trap. And when they vanished, when they were consumed by whatever hell lurked here, the motel simply fed. The lights flickered again, and I swear I heard a whisper. It was low, guttural, like something deep inside the walls was trying to claw its way through. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was just a shadow, but it was enough to make my heart race. I grabbed the journal, my hands shaking. I couldn't go back. There was no going back. I was already too deep. The Skinwalker knew me now. It knew my name, my fears, my weaknesses. Hell, it might have even been me at this point. But there had to be a way to stop it. The ritual called for 3 things: a binding of blood, an offering to the woods, and a final incantation at the stroke of midnight. All I had to do was spill my own blood, offer something of myself to the woods surrounding the motel, maybe my fear, maybe my soul, and then say the words. But I didn't know what those words were. I couldn't understand half of the symbols, and the parts one could make out, they terrified me. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. I didn't have much time. I stepped into the front office, half expecting to see the door open on its own. It had happened before, but this time it stayed shut. I grabbed the key to room 6, the one I had been avoiding all night. Something told me it was time to confront whatever was waiting inside. Room 6. My feet felt like they were stuck in molasses as I approached. The air around me was heavier, like I was walking underwater. And then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of something moving inside. Scratching. I pushed the door open with a trembling hand. Inside, the room was cold. Colder than it should have been, even for this place. The bed was disheveled, sheets twisted, but it was the mirror that caught my attention. The mirror. It wasn't reflecting the room the way it should have. Instead, it was reflecting something else. A twisted, contorted version of me, with eyes that weren't my own, staring back at me. I took a step forward, my breath catching in my throat. The thing in the mirror smiled, showing teeth that weren't human. I slammed the door shut. The ritual had to be completed. There was no turning back. I took out the knife, the one I kept for protection, but it felt more like a tool of sacrifice now. My fingers hovered over my wrist, the blade cold against my skin. Blood. Blood to offer to the woods. The blood that bound me to this place. The world seemed to tilt around me. The walls pressed in. The shadows began to crawl. I took a deep breath. And I cut. I didn't feel the pain at first. The blood poured out of me, soaking into the floor, mingling with the ancient stains that had been there long before I arrived. My knees buckled, but I stayed on my feet. I had no choice. The ritual had to be finished. As I chanted the words, the ones I could barely understand, the air in the room thickened. The floor seemed to pulse beneath me, like it was alive. The shadows grew, reaching for me, wrapping around my legs, my arms, pulling me toward the mirror. And then, everything went silent. The mirror shattered. But what I saw in its broken pieces wasn't what I had expected. James stood in the reflection, his face twisted in agony, his hands raised as if pleading for help. He was trapped in the shards, a part of the curse he had willingly embraced. I had done it. I had ended it. But I hadn't. I wasn't free. And now I was part of it. I stood in the center of the motel lobby, my heart pounding like a drum, hands trembling as I clutched James's journal. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, as if the very walls of Moonlight Pines were holding their breath. Outside, the wind howled, slapping the trees around, but it felt too far away, distant, like the world was fading into nothingness. My stomach churned, my legs heavy, like I was moving through water. This place had always been wrong, but now it was more than that. It was alive. The Skinwalker had been closing in inch by inch. I could feel its presence, pressing against me like an invisible weight. The journal's last entry had promised power, a way out or a way in. I didn't know what would happen when I followed the ritual. It didn't matter. I couldn't let it consume me, not like it did to James, not like it did to everyone before him. I flipped through the pages one more time, feeling the roughness of the leather against my fingers. The words twisted in my mind, burning themselves into my thoughts. The ritual described in the journal was simple in its instructions, but the meaning, the consequences? Those were hidden between the lines, beneath the surface. It spoke of a binding, of a shift from one life to another, a life beyond the bounds of the mortal world. A life in the shadows. "You have to stop it, Eddie," I muttered to myself, voice hoarse. My reflection in the cracked glass behind the reception desk seemed distant, as though it wasn't mine. I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus, but the motel around me started to distort. The walls creaked, groaned, and the faint flicker of lights overhead seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. The floor shifted beneath my feet, like it wanted to swallow me whole. The pages of the journal felt heavier now. Each word felt like a chain, pulling me deeper into the darkness. I turned to the final page, where James had written something in his desperate, slanted scrawl. "Take the path, bind yourself to the land, or let it take you." I didn't know what he meant. Did he mean the land would claim me if I didn't do this? Was it too late to turn back? A crash sounded from the hallway, the sound of a door slamming open. My head whipped around, but no one was there. A chill ran down my spine as a low growl, barely audible, echoed from the end of the hall. I could feel it, its breath, hot and foul, creeping closer. The Skinwalker. It was here. It knew I was about to make my choice. I couldn't back down now. Not after everything I'd seen. Not after everything I'd lost. I set the journal down on the counter, watching the pages flutter as though caught in a wind. My fingers itched to act, but I hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing against me. What if it was a trick? What if I became the next monster? But then I heard it, a voice soft and distant but unmistakable. It was James. His voice, but warped, like he was calling from a place far beyond human reach. "Eddie," it whispered, just loud enough to send a shiver down my spine. "Join us." I felt my chest tighten. I gritted my teeth and slammed the journal shut, the sound echoing through the empty room. I wasn't going to listen. Not to James, not to anyone. I had to end this. I had to stop it, even if I had to destroy myself in the process. I followed the ritual's instructions, my hands shaking as I traced the symbols James had scrawled on the pages. The motel seemed to react, the air growing colder, the shadows growing deeper around me. The lights above flickered one last time before plunging everything into darkness. My breath came in shallow gasps, each one colder than the last. I didn't know if I was prepared, but I had no choice. I whispered the words aloud. The room seemed to hold its breath as I spoke. By blood, by bone, I bind myself to this land. To the shadows. To the night. The air thickened. The shadows shifted, twisting like they were alive. I could feel them, brushing against my skin, crawling over me, through me. My heart raced, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The air around me vibrated, humming with a strange energy. And then it happened. The world seemed to fracture. The ground beneath my feet cracked open, and the walls of the motel seemed to fold into themselves, like the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. I heard the Skinwalkers laugh, low and guttural, echoing from every corner of the building. But it wasn't laughing at me. It was laughing with me. I felt it, the power. It surged through my veins, filling every part of me. I wasn't just Eddie anymore. I wasn't even human. I was something else, something more. My vision blurred, my senses heightened to a terrifying degree. I could hear every creak of the floor, every groan of the building, every whisper in the night. I could feel the night embracing me. I stumbled back, my body rebelling against the force of the change. My hands gripped the desk, but I couldn't feel them anymore. I looked down, and my skin wasn't the same. My hands were shadowed, like they belonged to someone else, something else. My bones ached as they shifted, realigning themselves. It was too much. Too much. And yet, it wasn't enough. The Skinwalker's laugh filled the room, and I understood. The ritual hadn't been a choice to destroy it. No, it had been a choice to become it. To become the Watcher, the Keeper of the Night. And now, the motel had a new clerk. I looked into the cracked glass, and for the first time, I saw myself. But it wasn't me. It was something darker, something that didn't belong. I took a deep breath, feeling the night course through me. And I smiled. The ritual was complete. But the real horror had only just begun. The clock on the wall ticks louder now, almost like it's counting down my last moments. Every second seems to echo in the dead silence of the lobby. I should feel relief. It's almost dawn, and the shift is almost over, but I don't. Instead, the weight of what I've learned tonight presses on me, suffocating me in ways I can't describe. I look at the front desk. The laminated rules are still there, the same ones I ignored at first. But now they mean something else. The last one, rule number 10, is staring me down like a death sentence. Never trust the clerk after sunrise. I'm the clerk now. I don't know how long I've been here, or how long I've been watching. I could have left, but I didn't. There's something strange about being here, something pulling me deeper, making me forget the world outside. I still remember the first time I saw the motel, the eerie quiet, the oppressive weight of the place. I had no idea what I was walking into, but now I don't think I can ever leave. James's journal was right. The Skinwalker didn't just feed on people. It fed on the land. The people who checked in weren't guests, they were offerings. They were food too, but they were part of something bigger. The more I think about it, the more I realize that I'm no different from them now. I've been changed. I can feel it in my bones, deep in my chest. Something dark and ancient is inside me, just like it was inside James. The Skinwalker is still out there, still watching, but it's not out there anymore. It's in here, in the air, in the walls. It's me now. There's a flicker, then the lights dim. The old neon sign outside glows a dull, sickly green. Moonlight pines. But it feels like the motel is feeding off its own decay. The building breathes with me now, and I can feel its pulse. There's a hum in the air, like static before a storm. I've been awake for too long, but I can't leave. I won't leave. I sit back in my chair, my fingers tapping on the counter absent-mindedly. The TV flickers to life, though I never touched it. Room 9, the same one from earlier. The same static, the same distorted voices. The screen warps, showing flashes of images I don't want to see, things that don't make sense. And yet, it's all too familiar. I stand, my legs unsteady, like I've forgotten how to move. I glance at the clock again. 6:05 a.m. The light outside is growing brighter, but it feels wrong. It feels like it's fading, like the sun is only a lie. The shadows are stretching, growing longer. I know deep down that something has changed. I think about leaving. I think about running. But I don't. I can't. The rules have changed. I'm part of the rules now. I look at the laminated card once more. The last rule stares back at me, taunting me. It's my name that's written in the final line. Never trust the clerk after sunrise. The door slams open behind me. A gust of wind rushes through the lobby, chilling me to the bone. But I don't turn around. I don't need to. I already know who's standing there. It's James, or what's left of him. He's barely human, just a shadow of himself. His eyes are hollow, but they see everything, everything I've done, everything I am now. He smiles, that twisted grin stretching across his face. "Welcome to the night shift, Eddie," he says, his voice a rasping whisper. I can feel the smile pulling at the corners of my own lips. It feels like I've been waiting for this moment my whole life, like I've always been meant to stay here, to become what I've become. The weight of it all settles into my chest, and I realize something else. I've always been part of this place. I just didn't know it until now. "You're ready," he whispers again, stepping toward me. I take a deep breath, feeling the air grow colder, darker. It's not just the wind, it's the air inside me, inside the walls, inside the motel. I'm ready. I reach for the desk, my fingers grazing the laminated card one last time. It's too late for me. It's too late for anyone who comes through those doors. The clock ticks one final time, the sound of it louder than anything else. And then, everything goes dark. If you're reading this, it means you found my journal, my last shift. It's too late. I am the clerk now. I am the night. And the night always needs a watcher.